"She is nothing but trash," Isabella said, her voice cutting through the grand dining room like ice. And the Black Maid froze, her hands gripping the folded letter in her pocket as every guest turned to look at her. Clara Johnson, calm but wary, stood near the marble fireplace, her uniform neat, her hair pulled back in a careful bun, holding Lily Romano's hand with one gentle touch as the little girl clung to her side, eyes wide and uncertain. The chandeliers above sparkled in the soft light of the early evening, throwing prisms across the polished floor and the crystal vases on the sideboard, each reflection catching the tension in the room like a mirror of the unfolding drama. Clara felt the weight of 100 gazes, some curious, some judgmental, and some filled with quiet disdain, yet she did not flinch. Her eyes flicked to the envelope in her hand, the one she had tried to hide before anyone could question her intentions, the one containing the truth that might either redeem her or further inflame suspicion. Victor Romano, the Mafia Boss, leaned against the doorway, his posture relaxed but commanding, dark tailored suit impeccable, eyes scanning the room, reading every expression, every flicker of movement, knowing that what he saw would determine the course of the evening. Isabella's smile was cruel, polished with entitlement, as she gestured toward Clara and Lily, speaking in clipped, precise sentences that made the accusation feel rehearsed, intended to humiliate rather than seek understanding. Guests murmured behind raised hands and tilted heads, the room alive with whispered speculations, yet Clara remained centered, her grip on Lily firm, her shoulders squared, a quiet defiance radiating from her stance. She knew the value of patience, of measured words, and of showing grace under pressure, the very skills that had made her indispensable to the child she protected. Victor's gaze lingered on Clara for a long beat, absorbing the steadiness in her eyes, the calm in her movements, the unwavering care in the way she adjusted Lily's small coat when it slipped from her shoulders. He could see the injustice, the casual cruelty of words spoken by someone who thought their social status allowed them to define others. The envelope weighed heavily in Clara's pocket, a secret anchor, and she knew that if it surfaced at the right moment, it would expose the truth, clarifying her intentions and revealing Isabella's pettiness without a word from her. The room's chatter quieted as Isabella's next sentence faltered, the practiced cadence broken by the tension in her own voice, as she sensed the eyes shifting subtly toward Victor, who remained silent but alert, his presence alone reshaping the atmosphere, imposing order on the chaos without raising his voice. Clara's lips pressed together, her hand brushing the envelope against her side discreetly, feeling the pulse of the house, the rhythm of the guests' whispers, the unspoken alliances, and the delicate thread between accusation and vindication. Lily's small fingers curled around hers, grounding her, reminding her why she remained calm, why she met eyes without fear, why she did not react to insult with anger, but with dignity. The chandeliers reflected the room in fragmented light. The polished floors mirrored every movement, every twitch of a smile, every tightening of a jaw. And in that mirrored dance, Clara remained a still point of truth, the only one in the room who knew what had really happened, and the only one who could hold the secret that might finally turn the evening from humiliation to revelation. Early that morning, Clara Johnson moved quietly through the Romano mansion's kitchen, the pale light of dawn filtering through tall windows onto polished granite countertops. Lily Romano sat at the small breakfast table, coloring carefully with crayons that Clara had organized the night before, her dark eyes focused but trusting, occasionally looking up at Clara for guidance. Clara's hands worked methodically, preparing oatmeal and fruit, arranging small dishes of juice, ensuring everything was perfectly proportioned and warm enough for Lily to enjoy, her movements calm and precise, reflecting the care and attention she had given every morning for months. On the counter, a neatly folded letter lay partially hidden beneath a stack of children's books and an apron, the envelope containing sensitive family information that Clara had meant to keep private until the right moment, a secret weight she carried silently. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee and buttered toast, a simple comfort in contrast to the tension that often accompanied her interactions with Isabella Romano, the fiancée whose presence always brought subtle challenges and tests of patience. Clara glanced toward the hallway leading to Victor Romano's study, knowing that he observed the household with quiet authority, unseen yet omnipresent, and that her careful routines were often noted even if unspoken. She gently poured the oatmeal into a small bowl for Lily, her hands steady, and offered it to the child with a soft smile. "Careful, it is warm," she said, and Lily giggled, a small relief that softened the morning light. Clara adjusted Lily's chair and smoothed the hem of her sweater, taking care to tuck stray strands of hair behind her ears, attentive to the small details that mattered to a child who had lost her mother and relied on Clara for stability. Every motion was deliberate: the placement of a napkin, the alignment of utensils, the exact angle at which the juice cup rested on the tray. In the quiet, she allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, recognizing the weight of her responsibilities, not just to Lily, but to the balance of trust, dignity, and discretion that shaped her every day. Outside, the first hints of sunlight struck the courtyard, reflecting through the large panes and casting long, soft shadows across the floor. Clara glanced at the letter again, considering the implications if it were discovered prematurely. She tucked it back under the stack of books, hidden from view, her expression calm and unshakable. Lily's small hand found hers again, squeezing gently, grounding Clara in the reason for her vigilance. She leaned down slightly to whisper, "Let us get ready for the day," and Lily nodded eagerly, returning to her coloring. The mansion was still silent beyond the kitchen, the servants quietly preparing rooms and hallways for the day ahead. But in this quiet routine, Clara maintained her composure and authority, moving with the knowledge that her actions, her care, and her prudence would shape the course of the morning and perhaps the events that would follow. Later that afternoon, Clara Johnson carefully arranged Lily's art supplies in the nursery, the soft golden light of late winter streaming through the tall windows, casting elongated shadows across the hardwood floors. She picked up the small envelope she had meant to keep hidden, containing details about a family matter that was sensitive and private, and tucked it gently beneath a stack of coloring books and storybooks on the shelf, her hands steady despite the tension she felt. Lily knelt beside her, gluing colored paper pieces together for a school project, occasionally looking up at Clara with wide, trusting eyes that reminded her why she had to remain composed no matter what. The walls were lined with framed photographs of the Romano family, all smiling and pristine, but Clara's gaze lingered on the empty spaces between them, where history was complicated and unspoken rules governed the household. Outside the nursery, the faint hum of the mansion's staff moving in corridors reached her ears, each step echoing the rhythm of a house that demanded precision and careful discretion from everyone within it. Clara's lips pressed together as she considered the implications of the letter being discovered prematurely. It was not just paper, but a key to revealing truths that others were eager to manipulate for their own advantage. She smoothed a small blanket over Lily's shoulders, noticing the way the child's concentration never wavered despite the undercurrent of tension in the house, and realized that trust had to be nurtured quietly, in small, careful gestures, rather than in grand declarations. Every action she took was deliberate, stacking pencils by size, aligning glue sticks, straightening the pages of books, and ensuring that Lily's chair was comfortable and positioned for proper lighting. Clara could feel the pulse of the mansion beyond the nursery walls, the subtle shifting of adults preparing for the evening's event, whispers exchanged in hallways, and the sense that her every move was being observed and judged. Yet within this quiet sphere, she maintained complete control over her environment, using careful routines to ground herself and the child she cared for. The letter in her hand weighed as much as responsibility itself, reminding her that one misstep could lead to misunderstanding, but also that patience, composure, and attention to detail could protect innocence from accusation. Lily's fingers briefly touched hers, a reassuring connection, and Clara smiled faintly, whispering, "We are careful, and we are steady," as if the act of stating it aloud gave power over the tension surrounding them. She placed the letter back in its hidden spot, adjusted a book leaning on the shelf, and stepped back to admire the small, controlled environment she had created, a sanctuary of order, trust, and quiet strength, ready to face whatever challenges the mansion and its inhabitants might present that evening. The engagement party unfolded in the Whitmore Mansion's grand living room, the chandeliers glittering above, crystal catching every glint of light, and the polished floors reflecting the tension as Clara Johnson and Lily moved quietly through the crowd, maintaining distance while keeping a watchful eye on Isabella Romano. Guests in elegant gowns and tailored suits paused mid-conversation, their murmurs dampened by the sudden confrontation. Isabella held the envelope up like evidence, her voice cold and precise as she accused Clara in front of everyone, framing the Black Maid as careless, deceitful, and unworthy of trust, while her fiancé lingered near the piano, uncertain but silent. Clara's posture remained composed, one hand gently resting on Lily's shoulder as the child peeked up at her with wide eyes, sensing the injustice but trusting Clara's calm. Victor Romano stood on the upper landing, observing quietly from the shadows of the hallway, his expression unreadable, noting every flicker of movement, every facial twitch of the guests, every small indication of guilt and tension. The envelope in Isabella's hand seemed to grow heavier with each word she spoke, the air thick with expectation, as she presented selective fragments of the letter to the gathered crowd, each statement calculated to humiliate without revealing the whole truth. Clara's fingers brushed against her own hidden envelope, tucked discreetly beneath her skirt, containing the real truth that could expose Isabella's manipulation. She did not flinch, her breathing controlled, her gaze steady, signaling calm in the face of public accusation. Lily clung to her side, small but firm, whispering reassurance and grounding Clara's resolve. The room felt suspended in time, guests frozen in polite disbelief as the dynamics shifted between wealth, power, and morality. Victor finally stepped forward slightly, just enough for his presence to be felt, not yet intervening but letting the weight of his authority ripple through the room, influencing perceptions, making Isabella hesitate as she sensed the silent scrutiny. Clara shifted her weight, adjusting Lily's hand in hers, and in that brief movement, a subtle but undeniable strength radiated, a quiet defiance against falsehood, injustice, and public shaming. The sound of a dropped glass in the distant hall punctuated the tension, reminding everyone present that the house, despite its beauty, was a place of scrutiny, observation, and latent power. Isabella's next words faltered slightly, the calculated cadence broken by the pressure of being watched, as Victor's eyes swept the room, noting which guests were inclined to believe the accusation and which understood the weight of what had just been said. Clara's breath remained even, her composure intact, aware that every motion, every glance, and every silent exchange could influence the unfolding judgment. The chandeliers continued to scatter light across the room, breaking into fragments on polished surfaces and mirrored panels, and in the midst of this spectacle, Clara remained the only point of stillness and truth, poised to reveal her side when the time came. Clara Johnson stood at the edge of the ballroom, her hands resting lightly on Lily Romano's small shoulders, keeping the child close as whispers floated around them like drifting dust in the evening light. Isabella Romano held the envelope high, her fingers tight around the folded paper, and spoke with a precision that carried authority yet veiled personal malice, presenting selective fragments to the assembled guests to imply Clara's negligence or dishonesty. The chandeliers overhead scattered light across polished floors and crystal vases, reflecting the tension in every mirrored surface, catching glimpses of gasps, stifled murmurs, and eyes flicking between Clara and Isabella, as though the room itself were waiting for a verdict. Clara's other hand brushed against her own hidden envelope tucked beneath the folds of her uniform, the one containing the full, untainted truth, and she drew a slow, steadying breath, aware that revealing it at the right moment could shift perception instantly. Lily's fingers curled around hers, grounding her in purpose, reminding her of the responsibility she bore not just for herself, but for the child who relied on her calm and courage. Victor Romano remained at the upper landing, observing with quiet intensity, noting how Clara held herself with composure, how Lily's trust and small gestures reinforced her credibility, and how Isabella's carefully constructed accusations could crumble under scrutiny if the evidence surfaced. Clara subtly adjusted the positioning of Lily's hand and her posture, small movements conveying steadiness and confidence without a single word, while the murmurs among the guests grew louder yet remained cautious, reflecting the fragile balance of social expectations and moral observation. The letter in Clara's pocket, the subtle anchor of truth, rested against her side as if urging patience, waiting for the moment when clarity would be demanded and injustice exposed. The room seemed to contract and expand with each sentence Isabella uttered, the polished surfaces, reflective floors, and glittering crystal catching each fleeting reaction. Yet Clara's calm acted as a counterpoint to the growing tension, a visual and emotional center of stability. Guests glanced at one another, sensing that the balance of power was shifting subtly but irrevocably, their attention pulled by Clara's poised silence and Isabella's faltering composure, while Victor's quiet presence suggested that a reckoning was imminent. Every detail mattered. The angle of Clara's gaze, the gentle but firm touch on Lily's shoulder, the slight shift in weight that radiated control, and the hidden envelope promising vindication. In this intricate dance of accusation, observation, and unspoken authority, Clara remained a point of truth, steady amidst the swirling whispers and the careful calculations of the wealthy and influential around her, ready to reveal the evidence that would restore dignity and set the stage for justice. Victor Romano let Isabella speak until the room had heard enough of her cruelty to recognize it for itself. He stood on the upper landing beneath the shadow of the carved banister, one hand resting near the rail, his expression so controlled that guests began glancing up before Isabella even noticed him. Clara Johnson remained beside Lily, still and steady, though the hand hidden near her pocket felt the edge of the sealed envelope pressing through the fabric of her uniform. Isabella had shown only one page, only one paragraph, only the part that made Clara look secretive, and she had done it with the confidence of someone who believed money could edit the truth. "She had no right to keep this from us," Isabella said, turning the folded paper toward the guests like a verdict. "A maid with private letters about this family? That is not loyalty. That is manipulation." Lily shook her head, her voice small but clear. "Clara helps me." Isabella smiled down at the child with polished patience. "Sweetheart, children do not always understand when adults are being dishonest." Clara felt Lily flinch, and something quiet inside her hardened. Not anger, not pride, a line. She could endure being insulted, but she would not allow Isabella to teach a grieving child that kindness was something to distrust. Before Clara could speak, Victor descended the staircase. Every step was measured. The soft music died without anyone asking it to stop. By the time he reached the floor, even the guests near the champagne table had turned silent. Victor did not look at Isabella first. He looked at Clara, then at Lily, then at the envelope in Isabella's hand. "Give it to me," he said. Isabella's smile faltered. "Victor, I was only protecting this family." "Then you should not be afraid of the whole letter being read." The room changed. Isabella's fingers tightened, but Victor simply waited, calm enough to make refusal impossible. At last, she handed him the page. Victor read the first line silently, then looked toward Clara. "Miss Johnson," he said, "do you have the rest of this correspondence?" Clara drew the sealed envelope from her pocket. Her hands trembled once, but her voice did not. "Yes, Mr. Romano. I kept it because I was waiting to give it to you privately." It involved Lily. Victor took the envelope with care, not snatching, not accusing, but receiving it as if her dignity mattered more than the paper. He opened it and read. The silence grew heavy. Isabella's eyes moved toward the terrace doors, then back to the guests, searching for an exit that still looked graceful. Victor lifted the letter slightly. "This is not a scheme," he said. "It is a recommendation from Lily's school counselor, thanking Miss Johnson for noticing that my daughter was struggling and requesting approval for a grief support program." A soft breath moved through the room. Clara closed her eyes for half a second. Victor continued, his voice lower now. "And this second page, the one Isabella chose not to show, explains that Miss Johnson paid the first consultation fee herself because she did not want Lily to wait while my office processed the request." The words struck the room harder than any accusation could have. Guests who had looked at Clara with suspicion now looked at the floor. Lily pressed herself against Clara's side, whispering, "You helped me." Clara placed a gentle hand over the child's shoulder. "I tried to, baby." Victor turned to Isabella, and the warmth left his face completely. "You called compassion manipulation. You called sacrifice trash. What exactly did you think this letter would prove?" Isabella opened her mouth, but no answer came. Victor folded the pages slowly, every movement final. It proved enough. Isabella Romano stood beneath the chandelier with the unfinished shape of an excuse on her face, but Victor did not give it room to grow. The letter rested in his hand now, complete and undeniable, its pages no longer a weapon in Isabella's fingers, but a witness in his. He turned toward the guests, and the silence tightened around every crystal glass, every silver plate, every polished smile that had leaned toward suspicion too quickly. Miss Johnson saw what I did not, Victor said, his voice quiet enough to make the room listen harder. My daughter was hurting in ways this house was too busy to notice. She asked for professional support. She paid the first fee herself. And while some of you were prepared to judge her for carrying a private letter, she was carrying my child's pain with more care than this family showed tonight. Clara's throat closed. She had not expected him to say it that way, not with the whole room watching, not with Lily pressed against her side and breathing in tiny, uneven breaths. She had only wanted the letter delivered before Lily's next school meeting. She had only wanted the little girl to have help without waiting for adults to argue about appearances. Isabella's face had gone pale under the soft gold light. "Victor, you are making this dramatic," she said, but the old confidence had cracked. I was concerned about boundaries. Victor looked at her as if the word itself had become something dirty in her mouth. Boundaries protect people. You use them to humiliate someone who could not fight you without risking her job. A woman near the piano lowered her eyes. A man at the sideboard set down his drink as carefully as if the sound might expose him too. Victor folded the letter and placed it into his inner jacket pocket. "This engagement is suspended," he said. The room seemed to inhale all at once. Isabella stared at him. "You cannot mean that." "I do." His answer came without anger, which made it final. "A woman who calls another person trash in front of my daughter does not get to teach my daughter what family means." Lily looked up then, her eyes shining but steady. "Clara is not trash," she whispered. The words were small, but they moved through the room like a bell. Clara bent slightly, brushing her thumb over the back of Lily's hand. "It is okay, sweetheart." But Victor shook his head once. "No, Miss Johnson, it is not okay. And that is why everyone here will hear the apology." Isabella's lips parted. Pride battled panic across her face, but there was nowhere left to hide. The guests who had moments ago watched Clara's humiliation now watched Isabella's reckoning. At last, Isabella turned toward Clara. "Miss Johnson," she said, each word dragged through clenched dignity. "I apologize for what I called you and for misrepresenting the letter." Clara held her gaze. She did not smile. She did not thank her. "I heard you," she said softly. Victor stepped beside Clara and Lily, not too close, but close enough that the room understood where protection now stood. "From this moment forward," he said, "Miss Johnson is to be treated as what she has proven herself to be, a trusted member of this household." No one argued. No one dared reduce the moment with a laugh. The chandeliers still glittered above them, the flowers still stood in crystal vases, and the music still waited to return, but the room had changed. Clara Johnson had entered it as someone others thought they could name. She stood there now as someone they would never misname again. After Isabella's apology, the Whitmore mansion felt a shift in the air, subtle but undeniable, as if the chandeliers themselves reflected the newfound balance of truth and justice. Clara Johnson adjusted Lily's sweater gently, her calm presence radiating reassurance as the little girl hugged her tightly, smiling despite the earlier tension. Victor Romano stood near the staircase, his dark suit immaculate, hands folded lightly, observing the room and ensuring that respect for Clara's integrity would remain unquestioned by anyone present. Guests who had once whispered in judgment now moved quietly, their eyes lowered, processing the evening's revelations, while the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint ticking of a large antique clock provided a rhythmic backdrop to the subdued atmosphere. Clara's envelope, safely returned to her inner pocket, no longer carried the weight of fear but the quiet power of vindication, a symbol that patience and dignity had triumphed over impulsive judgment. Lily's small fingers laced through Clara's as she skipped over to the dining table to show a drawing she had finished during the commotion, a colorful depiction of the family home with herself and Clara in the center, a visual reminder of the bond that had formed despite the chaos. Victor's gaze softened slightly as he watched the interaction, noting the strength and resilience Clara exhibited, the steady guidance she provided Lily, and the silent message it sent to everyone in the room. Respect is earned through integrity and care, not through status or wealth. Isabella remained near the doorway, her posture tense but subdued, the sharp edges of entitlement dulled by the undeniable clarity of the situation, her earlier confidence replaced by reflection and a growing awareness of the consequences of her actions. The soft glow of the evening sun filtering through the tall windows highlighted the intricate moldings on the walls and the polished surfaces, casting a warm light over Clara and Lily as they moved back toward the kitchen to prepare a snack, their quiet teamwork a contrast to the earlier drama. Victor followed a few steps behind, allowing them space, yet his presence alone offered protection and acknowledgement of their worth. Conversations resumed in hushed tones among the guests, their earlier fascination with scandal replaced by subtle admiration and understanding. Clara's posture remained straight, her composure intact, the sense of relief tempered by the knowledge that dignity had been restored, not just for herself, but for Lily, and for anyone who might witness the subtle power of quiet, steadfast truth. In that luminous room, amidst sparkling crystal and polished floors, a new equilibrium settled, one where trust had been recognized, innocence honored, and the authority of the Mafia Boss silently reaffirmed without a word louder than necessary, leaving Clara and Lily at the heart of a calm, just, and respectful environment. Long after the guests had left and the last car had rolled beyond the iron gates, the Romano mansion settled into a quiet that felt almost sacred. The grand dining room had been cleared, the crystal glasses washed, the flowers gathered from the tables, and the chandeliers dimmed until their light rested gently on the polished floor. Clara Johnson stood in the kitchen doorway with Lily asleep upstairs, still holding the drawing the little girl had made during the evening. It showed a house, a garden, a bright yellow sun, and two figures standing side by side beneath a blue sky. One was Lily. The other was Clara, drawn with a careful smile and a pink heart above her head. Clara traced the edge of the paper with her thumb, feeling the weight of everything that had almost been taken from her by one cruel word and one hidden paragraph. Victor Romano entered quietly, no longer surrounded by guests or expectation. Without the noise of the evening around him, he looked less like a man who controlled rooms and more like a father who had finally understood how close his daughter had come to losing someone she trusted. He stopped a respectful distance away. "Miss Johnson," he said, "I owe you more than an apology." Clara looked up. "You already defended me, Mr. Romano." "I defended the truth," Victor replied. "That was necessary. But you protected my daughter before anyone thanked you for it." He placed the folded letter on the counter between them, beside a small envelope sealed with the Romano family crest. "The grief support program is approved. Lily starts next week with the counselor you recommended." Clara's breath softened, as if some part of her had been holding it all day. She needs someone who can help her say the things she is afraid will hurt you. Victor looked toward the staircase, where the hallway light glowed faintly outside Lily's room. "I know." The admission was quiet, and because it cost him something, it mattered. Clara touched the envelope but did not open it. Victor noticed. "That is not payment for what happened tonight," he said. "It is reimbursement for the consultation fee you covered and a formal raise. Daniel will adjust your position title in the morning. You are not just staff in this house. You are part of the reason my daughter is healing." Clara blinked hard, but the tears came anyway, silent and dignified. She had spent years being useful in rooms where people forgot she was human. Tonight, someone had called her by her name, defended her truth, and seen the love hidden inside her labor. "Thank you," she whispered. Victor gave a small nod. "No, Miss Johnson. Thank you." The next morning, Lily found Clara in the breakfast room setting out oatmeal, fruit, and a tiny paper swan beside her bowl. The child ran to her and wrapped both arms around her waist, and Clara held her close while sunlight spilled across the table. From the doorway, Victor watched without interrupting. Some justice does not arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives in a child's trust restored, in a woman's name spoken with respect, and in a house finally learning that dignity is not given by the powerful. It is recognized by them.